Hey, all, welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. I am your host for today's episode, Cody Stoffer, and we're going to be doing something very different from what we're used to, right? And, I love getting the opportunity to make new content and expand, but, it is similar in the fact that we have an interview, but it's a change-up today. You're used to our interviews with athletes or, current coaches at times. But, I think that it's going to be really interesting to talk to a professional from a different aspect of sports. And so if you'd like to introduce yourself, where you're from, and what you get to do, go right ahead, man.
Yeah, my name's Cody Rosenthal, from Colorado, Littleton, Colorado. I'm a mental performance coach or sports psychologist. Mostly go by the name of mental performance coach right now.
Mental performance coach. That's what I have to keep in mind because I had my time at Northern Colorado studying sports psychology, so I have to transition that framing a little bit. So just call me out if I'm using the wrong term. But mental performance coach and or sports psychology. These are terms that I've only heard recently. I only heard of them once I was in college and past my athletic days. As far as performance goes, and in the more intramural side of my life, but. You mind filling us in on just some of the things you do and some of the things involved with your profession?
Working with athletes, coaches, teams, organizations, all ages, youth, all the way through, professional athletes, Olympians, even outside of the athletic field, but working on the mental side and being mentally prepared for different issues that might arise. So there's no snowballing effect that occurs if they have a stressful event. They don't keep adding to it, and then that creates more issues as it goes on. So it tries to stop that and help them be prepared to be successful and to achieve their goals and what they would like to successfully achieve.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess, obviously when I was growing up, the whole mental side of sports, if you would, for me, and I'm sure most athletes, was tough it out, forget about it. It's very just like coach things to say, but coaches, they know the sport that they're coaching, but it doesn't mean that they're a scientist of the brain or they understand the brain and how that relates to sports necessarily, maybe to the extent that you do. So how important is mental game and, mental performance in the realm of sports? I mean, you see guys who, squat 400 pounds, right? And it's like that's cool. But on game day, are you going to be mentally ready? Do you see instances of that, or just how important would you stress making sure that your mental performance is up to par to perform to the best of their abilities?
I'd say it's really important to have mental toughness, whatever you consider that to be, because, a lot of times as I was talking about the snowball effect, if someone's maybe not mentally tough, they might drop a pass, they might miss a block, a coach or something, another player might yell at them. Now they've already started that snowball effect of worrying, am I going to miss another one? Am I going to miss another one? Now they're not focusing on just making the play, just doing what they need to do to be successful, just getting, doing your job. You're more focused on these external issues now because it's, I don't want to mess up again. I don't want to do this again, instead of just playing free and being open and being like, you know what, if I mess up, it's a sport. I'm okay, but there's still next play. There's next game, whatever it might be, but learning from it and then growing from being able to learn.
Yeah, so like you said, first and foremost, maintaining the focus at the task at hand. I can say as an athlete and a former athlete that has happened to me. I played wide receiver. You drop balls in practice. Sometimes you drop them in games. It's a part of the game. It literally happens. But you're right, where it's like, crud, am I going to – and once you start thinking, am I going to catch this next pass? Then you're not focusing on catching the pass. So I think that's a perfect example of what you're talking about. And now, all you athletes listening to this episode, pencil that down, snowball effect, and try and call yourself out when you realize that you're doing it. But, I think that that's a great thing to bring to the forefront, bring attention to. And, like you said, it's something where, you have experience working with youth athletes, teams, coaches, all the way up to Olympians. Like the range of mental performance and sports psychology is just such a big one. And I guess like for myself learning about it recently, and maybe for a lot of these viewers hearing about it for the first time, I guess, how long has mental performance been around, or, sports psychology? Is this a new thing, or is it a thing that is just finally getting the attention that maybe it deserves?
It's more of getting the attention that it deserves. It's been around probably, some people can trace it back way back, around some of the first Olympics but I know like there's been studies and different things I think it was the 1930s, 1940s with like the Chicago Cubs or different things when it was really starting to kind of gain traction then of, working with athletes and seeing the benefit, and at the time it was still, mental performance or, the mental side of mental health just in general was still, oh, we don't touch it, or we're men, so that's not a big issue. So it just didn't get the attention. But the studies that they were doing, with the Chicago Cubs, they were seeing the benefits, but they just didn't want to put in the time and the effort. It was, oh, it's whatever. They're just going to get over that. We're just going to keep playing. We're not going to worry about this side of it. And periodic, and as from there, it's grown into now professional teams have it. The Olympic committee has, teams of 10s, 20s, 30 people on it. Colleges have it in kind of like their counseling section, for all sports. Different kind of academy schools, if you want to call it that. Like you have like IMG Academy in Florida, or some in Texas, one or two in California, they're starting to have it there as well, where, to help those athletes, because those places are so sport focused first. So it's been around for a really long time, but now more and more as mental health has become a major forefront in people's eyes, it's now starting to really blossom and open up.
Which is great to hear. And I mean, the Chicago Cubs, of course, kind of diving into it back then, and then they're like, let's forget about it, and they don't win a World Series forever. So until recently, when sports psychology, mental performance kind of makes a return. So maybe learn a lesson from the Cubs if you don't want to go a gazillion years without a championship, and don't lose touch with your mental performance side. But I think that's awesome to hear, just how much it's growing. Like you said, societally, we're, I think, making really good strides as far as realizing how important mental health is, how crazy the brain is. And I think that that's even more so important for sports psychology, because, I mean, sport in society, in your day-to-day life, there's not really a whole lot of things like sport, right? Yeah. As far as just like being competitive and stuff. So I guess as someone who's focused on mental performance, and I guess, are you able to attest to like some of the big differences mentally of like a day-to-day person versus like maybe an athlete, and why it's better to have maybe a specialist rather than just a psychologist? Or not disrespecting psychologists, by the way. I'm just saying for this specific task at hand of sports, maybe why it's better to have mental performance or sports psychologist eye on it.
Yeah, just because, I've talked to, I've worked in different places where they've been therapists, psychologists, things like, professions in that, or counselors, and they've, and then they're like, oh, you're a mental performance coach. I tell them my degree and everything, that it's a sports psychology degree, but I don't, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't touch that side of things, that really in-depth, real deep emotion. So like if your parents are going through a divorce or something like that, that's not what I would, what you would want to come for me for. Mine is more the sport specific side. with those issues of confidence or things like that, and talking to them, they're like, we would have no idea what to do because we're more focused on a lot more of the deep emotions, or like that. I don't want to say trauma, but you could say, depending on what the issue is, the trauma that might lie there. Where when you come to a mental performance coach, it's about the sport. Yes, you have life outside and we can talk about it and work on that, but we don't go in depth with it. And so that kind of draws more people, more athletes to it, because it's, yes, it's still a psychology or like a counseling, but it's not to the extent that, you can still be rough and tumble, but you're still getting the help. That's why we prefer to go by mental performance coaches, because, a coach is, someone that you go to for help. You have a fitness coach, you have your trainer, you have your weightlifting coach, your head coach, your offensive coach, your DB coach, or wide receiver coach, or quarterback coach. You have those specific types of coaches. So this is just another coach that you can go to, instead of being like, oh, I got to go see the counselor, or, because that kind of looks down upon. Oh, I just got to go see coach. I'm just gonna go talk to coach. Okay, great. That's good. Keep doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, just the way that you framed it, and that has bridged the gap for me quicker than almost anything else, is it just sounds so much more approachable, right? Because it's like, I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to coach to figure out, how do I leave this stuff in the back seat so I can drive the car and get it done on Friday night, more or less, or how are ways that I can balance what I need to do mentally and be ready, engaged. So that makes complete sense that it's a mental performance coach, because like you said, you have a coach for everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why would you not have a mental performance coach? You have the strength and conditioning coach. He's the guy who makes you into a brick house out here, and then you have the mental performance coach who makes sure that you're sharp and you're ready to go for Friday nights. Because I mean, in all of the time that we've broken down film here at Playmakers Corner, or all the games that we watched, you can see when players start to mentally kind of snap or break or experience like a wall of some kind. So I think that you could be big, strong, tough. I mean, we've seen quarterbacks that are 3-star recruits or whatever, and then they throw 2 picks and it turns into 3, and they're getting sacked and hurried, and they start overlooking receivers that are wide open and stuff like that. So I think that you could be as big as you want, but if you can't focus on the task at hand, or you can't be in tune to the game, that is something that I find very fascinating, that it can flip on you that fast. And like you said, it's a very, very important thing that gets, just now is getting the focus that it should. But like you were saying, you're approachable too. You could still be, because like you said, there's still a little bit of a stigma as far as like, maybe I don't want to go through my entire past for the game on Friday, right? Maybe I don't want to like air out all this laundry, but you know what I can do? I can go to coach and he can get me dialed in. So I think that those are all great points. And, I just talking about this gets me very excited, but kind of turning it back to you and focusing more on you. What was your path to becoming a mental performance coach?
I played football in high school, had some injuries, that affected me, stopped me from playing, the injuries and things like that. Went out to get my bachelor's degree. I thought I was going to go physical therapy, went and took a class because I had to for my bachelor's degree in sport and performance psychology. Fell in love with it, wanted to gain as much information as I could, soak it all up as a sponge. Went to different conferences, was talking to my professor, watching videos, things like that. I then went and got my master's degree in sport and performance psychology out in California, and just kind of worked on it from there, worked up with different teams, organizations out there, then came back here once I graduated, and, I've been working out here ever since.
Yeah, that sounds like a straightforward path that you went from an athlete to now somebody who coaches athletes. It's almost the same path as every other kind of coach. So there's another layer to the coaching aspect of the whole thing. But I guess, and this is a little out of order, but you started here in Colorado, you played here in Colorado your sports, then you go to California to study this. Is there like a difference in culture or like, I guess, maybe not culture, but just like, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just like approach to mental performance or something like is it more widely a thing in California than maybe here? Or do you think that Colorado is trending more towards that area? I guess like kind of what's the difference when you look at those two different states and their approach to mental performance in sports?
It seems like I don't want to say California is ahead of the curve because there's several states that are going in that way where they want it, they're kind of thirsty for it, they're interested for it, they want to get the work in, help the athletes, the coaches want to learn. I've done coaches clinics and things like that, and out here it's a slower trickle. Like there are the bits and pieces where you could find kind of those successes or those people that want it and are interested in it, but it's a little bit more, you really have to grind to find it, where in California it was oh, here's 4 high schools, I'm going to just send out emails, and then ADs and coaches would be getting back to you within a day or two. Yes, I'm interested, when can we meet and talk, set things up, kind of go from there. It's a much more thing of they want the successes for their athletes. And I don't know, it could be that it's more accessible out there because there's 2 or 3 schools that have it. So you have a large population of people in California that do it, where out here, you have 2 schools, but one is way down, in Alamosa, and then you got DU, but so it's not as accessible, and it's still a very niche market. And places like California, Texas, Florida, New York, even Minnesota with the hockey, Minnesota, North Dakota with hockey, those are those places that sports become more of their life out there more than here. They're willing to miss church or miss work for a high school football game, for some sort of event. It's on a lot of TV channels. It's really big news in the state or in the area, where out here you don't really necessarily hear a lot about the high school sports or the high school things that are going on as much as other states.
Boy, yes, you're correct in that sense, as far as just like media. As someone who is in the media covering high school football, I could tell you it's tough to find things sometimes. And 9 News has like, I don't know, maybe a 2-minute segment on like an entire week's of games where they talk about like 3 games or something. So that totally makes sense. And that kind of goes back to we had this episode where we talked about Colorado football, a culture problem, and just like that it doesn't get the attention that it deserves. And I think that the same could be said about a handful of sports here. Like we talk about this in a lot of different, camps and stuff. Colorado has the talent, but maybe isn't getting the attention or nourishment that it so deserves. And I think that even extends here to the mental performance aspect, where it's like, trying to get more funding for coaches that are even qualified to coach a team sometimes is absurd. Like some people who have jobs, it's surprising. I'm just going to leave it at that. But, for football teams to barely be getting qualified, just straight up coaches, just for what's happening, wide receivers, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, head coaches, it's no surprise to me when you say that, just the access to is maybe a little bit higher in some other states. But, like you said, it's moving forward. It's taking the steps. Moving forward and taking slow progress is better than no progress. And I think that having someone like yourself on the show to talk about it, spread awareness about it, get coaches' heads turned looking like, hey, because there are plenty of coaches that want to find a way to win. And, they're looking for different aspects to try and focus on. And maybe they just don't know that, hey, a mental performance coach, that sounds like a great idea for just getting this thing moving. I guess, like, what are some things that you think could be done a little bit differently, whether that's in like the Colorado aspect or whether it's just in the overall sports aspect, as far as kind of streamlining mental performance coaches and how important it is? Where do you think that bridge or that gap can kind of be bridged in some way?
Yeah, I've talking to kids that I graduated with that work, in California still, because that's where they live and everything, and they have some similar issues that I'm having or I've seen out here, where everybody, or not everybody, but a large population thinks that it's just, it's gonna be a one and done, go see somebody talk it over and fix it, which it's not that. And we don't want you to think it's that. So we tell you, yeah, it might take a couple sessions for you to get comfortable and really want to, and really see the improvement that you're going to do, but you have to want it and want to put the work in too, because, it's a two-way street, and more people are just like, I just want you to, give me all the information that you possibly can, and then I'm going to leave. And then I expect Friday night to be a great game or Saturday to be a great game. And, that's not going to work, because that happens where you work with organizations and teams, and they're like, you just didn't click with the team, or, we're not going to use you anymore, whether it's here, California or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it's also the fact that I've only met with them for 1 hour, like, nothing, or, 30 minutes, like nothing's going to come out of it, because we're still trying to get to know each other. Like, you have to want to bring it in as a part of your team culture. You're going to want to have someone that's around the team during practices, and maybe even in the weight room if they can spare the time, or, you allow them to be there, or in the meeting rooms and things like that. So they can, they're a part of it. They see what you're going through, that's going to give the players the respect to want to go talk to them, instead of just being, oh, here's some male or female, guy, girl, whoever is going to come talk to me once, and then we're maybe going to see them, one other time, or we might not see them at all this year. Make it be something that's present, that people get comfortable with, just talking to, hey, how's it going? Because you don't know what kind of conversation that might spark, where it's, someone might now, because they've seen the person around, now you've created this relationship, and the person's, and that athlete's willing to open up and being like, hey, I got some stuff going on, and I'm starting to notice that it's starting to affect my game, but it hasn't reached that snowball effect yet. What are some tools or different things that I can do to help, instead of instead of hitting that snowball effect and going, now I'm not getting playing time, I've dropped on the depth chart, I might not be getting college scholarships, or my college scholarships are now getting pulled because I'm not playing as good or as much as they want, and they want to move on to someone else, so now you're creating this extra ball of stress, and it's it's too much. You can't, you might be able to catch up, but for every couple steps you might end up falling back more. So you want to try to get ahead of the curve, instead of playing the, there's so much ahead of me, how am I supposed to climb this mountain? It's that, there's that, I think it's a Greek kind of story. I don't remember his name, but he's the guy that, like, he got in trouble, and Zeus gave him like the task of every day he has to climb or walk up this mountain with a giant boulder. So he walks up every time, and then, he walks away and it rolls back down. So every day it's the same cycle, so how do you break that cycle? Get ahead of it, instead of going, and now I have a big mountain to climb. I've walked a couple steps. I'm tired. Let me take a break. Now the rocks moved down, or the mountain's gotten bigger. What am I going to do?
Yeah, before it turns into a catastrophe, And it's like, who wants to do cleanup when you could have just been ahead of the game, right? Going up a hill instead of a mountain. I mean, from just a point of ease kind of way, I'd rather go up one than the other. So that's an excellent point. And I think that, something that helped me and just kind of understand, I guess, just how like mental performance or mental health works in general, like you're saying, it's something that you have to consistently do, is comparing it to physical work. Like, coach, do you lift one time before the season and expect to be stronger? No one expects that. You have an entire off-season program that has focuses on, upper body strength, leverage, speed, right? Like, you have all just as many, if not dozens more of aspects to think about mentally for any sport, contest, competition. So look at it that way. It's kind of, I mean, am I crazy for making that comparison? Or do you think that from like an athlete's perspective, that's a pretty easy comparison to make?
I mean, that's a pretty easy comparison to make. Or like when I'm working with more obviously on the U side, I always use the thing of school. You go in for a test or a project, you don't study for 30 minutes to an hour and go, oh, I'm going to ace this. That's not, if it's a hard test, you studying for an hour, you're probably going to fail. Now you have a failed test. What's it going to, now you're thinking, what's it going to do to my grade? What are my parents going to do? Do I have to retake it? Do I get, because that's something that kids deal with where, you put in the work, maybe you're only studying 15, 20 minutes a night, but you're studying for 2-3 weeks when the test, when the teacher says, hey, you got a test in a couple weeks, start prepping now. Now you're just doing little increments, but by the end, you're going to be like, oh, I know the information. I'm comfortable enough, are you going to get an A? That who knows, but you're not going to fail the test. You're at least going to be successful and proficient in that aspect of it. And that seems to also help them understand where it's like, oh, yeah, I do that with school too. So why would I not do that with this thing that I love?
Yeah, no, that's actually a way better comparison because it is a mental thing. So that's even better. And see, you got those comparisons on deck. And I guess, like you said, you've worked with youth athletes, but I don't know if you kind of want to take us through your story as far as, maybe some things that you have worked with, or like maybe some sports, or just maybe a little bit more about I don't want to say portfolio because that's not really what it is. They're people that you care about, but for lack of a better word, kind of just your experiences, your personal experiences through mental performance and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with police explorers for one, so they're youth that are in this program that some police departments do, that work with, that they're kids that want to go into law enforcement. So it's kind of like the prep for that, kind of like an ROTC is for the military. It's a little bit like that. I've worked with an ROTC, a couple ROTC programs. I've worked, football, baseball, softball, a dance team, a cheerleading team. I've worked in the video game realm with esports. I've done soccer, lacrosse, some track athletes, a little bit with some golf athletes, kind of a little bit of everywhere.
Yeah, lots of experience and lots of carryover, and I'm assuming that despite this wildly kind of I've been everywhere man kind of thing that you've experienced, I mean, you still see similarities throughout all of these things as far as mental performance goes. And I mean, you could almost like take things from each activity that you've helped with and almost like apply it to another situation, or have plenty of transferable skills too.
Oh yeah, I've been I'll be thinking about it like, oh, I got this going on, this session with this team or whatever with this organization. So now So I'm planning something, and then something pops in my head for something else, or, over here, oh, this would be good over here too, and I could change this and do this. So a lot of the things, it's very transferable, it's very fluid, because a lot of what it comes down to is what's going on with the athlete or the team. The topic is the fluid piece, but the thing that might not be as fluid is the individual, because each person experiences something different or has issues or stressors that are different than everybody else. So you want it to be very individualized and working on what they want to work on and what they're struggling with. Because if you're not doing that, then you're wasting everybody's time. If I'm talking to an athlete about, confidence, but they're really, really confident athletes, I've now just wasted 45 minutes to an hour of their time. Now they're not going to want to have anything to do with me, because they're like, they just wasted my time and took, and I paid for that. Why? And I didn't get anything out of it. It didn't help me. I just heard him talking the whole time, or, because I wasn't intrigued and wanting to gain anything from it and wanting to be successful in that point.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it goes both ways earlier, where, you are trying to help them, so you want to help them with something that they want help with or from or what have you. And so it's up to them to tell you what their focus is as well and what they're looking to gain. So I think that's a great way to bring that up. And I think that's awesome with all this experience. And man, I'm just so glad to have someone like yourself and, this emphasis on mental performance, taking a step forward here in the Box State, taking a step forward here in Colorado. And I guess, what are maybe some goals that you have, whether it's for the entire state or just like for the culture of Colorado, that you hope to be a part of in the realms of sport or, mental performance in sport?
Really taking the strides of, being able to differentiate, sport from individual, because, if those athletes get hurt, and sports their life, now I feel useless or whatever, where, you still are a person. The sport is part of your life, yes, but it is not your whole life. So understanding there's that differentiation there, because, and you as an individual, you have so many other interests or things that you enjoy or you find success in or happiness in, so kind of letting those lights shine as well as the sports side, because, when you're in sports and you're doing, it's 365 all the time, you get lost in that. So really working on the individual perspective of it and being, and growing individual, men and women into just successful people, because these skills aren't just skills for, working, for the sports realm. You could take them outside and when you're in school or at your job or, different things like that. Or later down the line, you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember talking about this, let me go back to that kind of thing, or find a YouTube video or a podcast or whatever it might be to help me kind of understand it a little bit more in depth if I need to.
And I think that's a great goal, because I mean, there's a point in every athlete's career where you're not going to be playing sports anymore. Unless you're Tom Brady, that guy might literally play until he ends up 6 feet under. I still can't tell you about that guy. But outside of whatever science experiment that is, I mean, every single athlete, whether you're regarded as the best to ever do it in Michael Jordan, or whether, you're somebody who just played up through high school, there comes a day where, you can still play for fun. Like, I play recreational sand volleyball these days, a far cry from high school football, in my opinion, as far as fun and stuff and competitiveness, of course. But there comes a day where it stops. And what do you have at the end of that? What are you still? And so I know plenty of athletes, even in my age group, and I know especially in older age groups, where once that day comes, what do I do now? What is my personality even? Like, there's nothing else that I know. So I think that is a very commendable vision and goal for a lot of athletes, and one that a lot of them can hear. And every athlete, there's so much more to them than just an athlete. And, it kind of goes both ways, not only in the what do I have left if I'm not playing anymore way, but also for athletes that are in the moment that are just so, I see this all the time, and I'm sure you've seen it too, where it's like, oh, I'm a great athlete, and that means that I'm invincible and I can do anything. And it's like this unnecessary, almost like kind of, it's the inverse, right? Where it's like almost toxic because they're so consumed by the sport that they don't see anything else, and they think that there's no flaws to them because they're so good at a sport. So it's definitely a dual-edged sword there, and one that I think doesn't get discussed enough, to be quite frank, and something that I don't think about too much, and I'm glad that you brought up and is something that is your goal, because I feel like when it comes to the realm of sports, a lot of people will say wins and losses, right? Like, if a coach gets hired, some coaches might say, oh, my biggest goal, my one goal is to make a state championship. And I know that, like, in my coaching philosophy, and I'm so grateful to, the program that I was in as far as sports coaching, where when I drafted up my philosophy, is like, my philosophy is to try and make these athletes, the best people they can be. Like you were saying, the best men, women, whoever, to come out of a program and take these skills, whether it's from the gridiron, on the court, off the court, from the bench, whatever lessons were learned about who they are as people or just how life works, that is the ultimate goal. And so I think that hearing that just like solidifies my gut feeling about what you're trying to do, and just you as a person and coach, that this is what we need in Colorado, is this focus on not necessarily, well, to an extent, what's happening on the gridiron, of course, but what's happening after that, what's happening outside of that, outside of the lines. And yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for, bringing all of this to our attention, bring this to our audience's attention. And I kind of want to just give you the floor real quick to see if there's anything else that you'd like to add on, if there's any way that you want to be found for people to come out and ask more questions potentially, as far as, what you do. And, if there's anything else that you want to tack on here, go for it, man.
Yeah. One thing, when we met, months ago, and we were talking, I was, just how we were talking, that now, especially, with these high school kids, it's a lot of, seeing what the other kids are doing in your class, your graduating class, and how do I reach up to that? Or, the really probably annoying up to this point that a lot of people hear is, trust the process. That cliche, because you have, because just because you're you're a good athlete or whatever on a team, your scholarships might come a little later, and that's okay, but you still have to keep working, because everybody sees, because again, as we were saying, you see those 5-star athletes in the state, on the news, they get those scholarships, but you don't see that, maybe that 2-3-star athlete that's grinding every day in the gym, in the weight room, at practice, maybe getting work outside, getting some really good work at some of those facilities that are out there in this state, and those are the athletes that, those scholarships will come, but it's going to be at a later date. But everybody's like, deer in headlights, what do? I haven't gotten to my scholarship yet. Everybody else is getting scholarships. I feel left out. Now again, you're creating stress, creating that snowball effect.
I was about to say, it's just a different snowball coming from another angle that you're not looking at.
Exactly. And you're creating it yourself instead of just focusing on what you need to do to be successful, or what you need to do to help your team be successful. You're now focusing on that person that, you've never ran into in your life, and you're probably never going to run into, but because they got a college scholarship, you now feel like you're less than them, or you're lesser because you haven't gotten one yet.
I remember I appreciate you bringing that up, because you're exactly right. And it's just one more thing to lose focus on. Like, but the crazy thing is that it's not something that, like, you're letting an outside force do this versus, like, you drop a pass. It's like, I know how to catch a football, so you could just go catch a football. This, I can't control how many offers, for example, Braden Dorman has. I can't control how many offers Luke McAllister had. I can't control how many offers Arch Manning has, right? Like, because some people will pay attention to the entire country, which is just like you said, it's ridiculous. Why are you doing that? What are you hoping to accomplish by looking at how many scholarships A, B, and C has when you should just be focusing on YOU? So, that's just one more layer of focus that can totally be lost. And, it's something that there's athletes, whether it was last year, this year, the year before. I mean, it's been going on forever since the dawn of college scholarships. And, it's one of those things where, yes, you and I understand as students from universities, school's expensive. Okay. We get that. We understand that. You're working hard. Yes. A lot of people are doing that. It's a very understandable plight. However, once the game starts, you got to focus on that. Or, once the off season's going, you got to roll with that. Like, just address the task at hand instead of worrying all the time and missing things. You know what I mean? So I'm so glad that you brought that up again. Spoiler alert, listeners, I didn't just invite this random guy onto our show. I had a conversation with him. Was that a few months ago, I want to say?
Yeah, I think so.
It was like 2 hours of just talking sports and mental performance. So, I was just so intrigued, fascinated, and amazed by it and everything he had to say that I was like, we got to get you on the show. We got to get you on the show and spread this information and just help out with these tips. And, even this advice, this is just the tip of the iceberg as far as, ways that Kodey can help, because, I mean, like he said, he's seen so many things. He's been through so much experience. He's learned a lot, constantly learning. It sounds like lifelong student, going to a bunch of coaching clinics and conferences and what have you in that regard. So, constantly improving his mental performance in helping mental performance, which, say that like 5 times fast. But anyways, he's just so helpful, and he has, an entire tool belt, and he wants to be able to, lend you these tools to be successful. I think that, these are just a couple of examples that we've used, whether it's, like you said, dropped passes, whether it's looking at grades and working out and comparing that to mental performance, because, I mean, there's just so many aspects that go into, even like football is our go-to here at Playmakers Corner. So just using a single play, if you're on offense, the snap has to go right. Everyone has to know their blocking assignments. The receivers have to know their routes. The quarterback has to know the routes. Read the defense. What's happening, like, from there? Maybe acknowledging outside factors, but not being, completely entangled in them and let them bundle you up, to understand how the ball is going to get to where it needs to go and how the play is going to go. So just like that, on like an individual level, there's a bunch of things that you need to do to be mentally sharp, physically sharp, and emotionally sharp too, which is kind of entangled in that mental performance a little bit, as far as, keeping those in check and being able to perform. There's just so many levels and layers to this. And I just had such a great time conversing with him and going through the formalities first, of course, but, learning all of this from Kodey. And I'm just so grateful that you've come onto the show to share a lot of these things and share it with our listeners, who I think, even after this interview, however long it ends up becoming with the editing or whatever, it's a bunch of things that are now being thought of by athletes and coaches, hopefully alike, in programs that just understand that there's so many levels to this. And I'm so grateful for your time coming on and talking about it.
I appreciate it very much for allowing me to come on.
And I mean, I could totally ramble on for hours and talk about every single sports experience I ever had. But, I think for you, looking back on your athletic endeavors, is there like a moment where you think back and like, man, if I knew now what I knew then, whether it's, going through like just the high school process or becoming more than an athlete or what have you, that you've learned on your journey to becoming a mental performance coach? Do you have like any kind of moments or aha moments that, looking back, if you knew then what you knew now with all of your experience and everything that you have learned and studied, would have maybe helped you out with any situations?
I could think of, one, going back again with the conversation of, kind of focusing on kind of what you need to do is, when you have a big rivalry game, your big rivalry school, and your coaches are trying to hype you up, the coaches are saying, well, this team's doing this and this team's doing this, and, they're doing this, and we're doing, we're this, and, well, they're working harder here, but we're working harder here, instead of worrying about, what you need to do. It doesn't matter what they did on practice on Monday. If maybe they watched film all day and you don't know that, but your coaches are saying, they did this, and, they worked on this pass, and they did this drill, and they were planning for this. Okay. But what did you do to get better for that game on Friday? What is the building block from Monday to Tuesday? Because because the coaches are there to help you along the way, but also, that could be a hurtful motivation, because again, now you're putting it on, well, what are they doing, instead of, what are we doing to get better, because, they're like, oh man, you had a great practice. They didn't have a great a practice as you did. Maybe that's true, but looking back, you get to the game. And, I'm thinking about that, get to the game. And so, the very first play, my team, we received the ball, boom, got the ball, fumbled it, kickoff, fumbled the football in the kickoff. The entire team, deer in headlights. What do we do? Instead of worrying about, how do we perform better and do the little things better, we were looking big picture of, this is a rival, we have to beat them. Why can't we focus on what we did on Monday was great, but let's work on what we do on Tuesday to make Monday better, to make each day more successful, to get to the goal of what we want to do.
Yeah, and just having those like verbal checks is a nice thing, that you as a mental performance coach can just be like, hey guys, maybe we shouldn't talk about what the other team's practicing, because I mean, like you said, once you receive the opening kickoff, it doesn't matter what happened at their practice that week if you guys weren't on your stuff. So I think that that's an excellent example from your personal experience, and, one that in your time, whether you've seen it again or will see it again, something that you will probably stumble across another coach doing, or have stumbled across another coach doing almost for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, football is a little bit slower to change than some other sports from what I've seen. Wing T, but but like you said, staying focused on yourself and what your squad is doing, and just like that duality that you have in mental performance, where it's like addressing the team but also addressing the individual, like you said, because every individual is going to learn differently, they're going to hear differently, they're going to act differently. So like just that dynamic is something that I don't think is almost focused on enough, especially with football and team sports, because it's one thing if it's like, hey, you have your position coaches, but if you're a wide receiver, they're working with like 5 or 7 other athletes at the same time, right? So you don't really have that, like, is this coach going to be able to figure out what makes me tick, and how long is that going to take, and is that going to be in time to make plays and win football games, right? And you could say the same thing about like basketball too, or baseball is a big one, because I mean there's like a dozen pitchers on any team, so like you said, your experience in baseball is even more emphasis for that, because I've seen lots of different walks of life go up to that mound, but what they do from there is up to them, because I mean, especially from like a pitcher standpoint, it's almost like you versus the world. So being able to find that individual help, but also address an entire team and see, what is the rest of the outfield doing? How can we do this to kind of help out this aspect of the game and whatnot for our team? Still that sense of self-identity, whether it's with the team or with yourself, being able to kind of focus on both those things is something that I think sports has going for it that, maybe on an individual societal level, you don't really experience as much with that multiple focus.
Definitely. You become more, the group project is, in school, we're all working on to get this, but, and the grade is shared. Things are shared. It's not, you do little successes, your successes benefit the team.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's just another dynamic that I find so interesting about mental performance and things that you've talked about so far, both in our very first meeting and in this interview. And I'm so glad to be educated, and I'm really glad and hopeful of the listeners. And I think that the video quality has been pretty good on this Skype on my end. So
Yeah.
maybe even video viewers take away from this. I think that it's super conducive to not only the Colorado football culture and sports culture, but just sports culture in general, to have these kind of informational things. And I think that, you've proved yourself as just a great source. And I just want to give you the time to kind of plug yourself a little bit here, and maybe some places that listeners or viewers might be able to find you. I know where, but maybe they all don't.
Yeah. I have a Twitter, at Code Red Perform 1 is my Twitter. I have a website, coderedcoaching.com. Then I have an Instagram. My Instagram is Code Red Coaching _ is my Instagram. So those are three major places to find me. My website, as I said, Code Red Coaching has my email, my phone number, and then just a place, ask general questions or anything, you can do that. And then, it sends it to me, and then, I can communicate with you from there as well.
Perfect. So plenty of places to reach and plenty of places to find even more information than I don't know what else you need to know after this interview. Well, at least in the broad sense. But anything after this, you got to get more specific. And Kodey, thank you so much for taking time, joining us on the show, and getting to know us. And maybe we can, as long as your work schedule is maybe not too busy, maybe I can drag you out to a game on Friday night, and we could kind of talk just football and sports for a minute. But we'll see and look ahead to that.
I'd enjoy that.
But if I don't, then that's a good sign that you're too busy, and these listeners actually followed through and are getting mentally stronger and mentally tougher, or whatever you want to. It's called 1,000 million different things, but for Code Red here, it is mental performance coach. Thank you so much, Coach, for joining us, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you again. I appreciate it very much.
And that was Cody Rosenthal of Code Red Coaching. Make sure to follow him on all of those social medias, and you will be hearing more about him in the coming weeks, especially the month of October and for the rest of the season. So just keep your ear to the ground on that. Go ahead and check him out. But I've been your host, Cody Stoffer, on this episode of Playmakers Corner, to which you are probably listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Anchor. If you're listening on one and prefer another, go ahead and check us out on there. Follow, like, subscribe, whatever you got to do to get notifications for all of our latest episodes being out. Or if you want pretty graphics and announcements, go ahead and check us out on social media. We are at Playmakers Corner on Instagram, where we post games of the week, episode covers, Playmakers of the week, etc., etc. We also are on Twitter at Playmaker Corner. We're on Facebook, Playmakers Corner, and we're on TikTok, posting highlights from games that we attend from our games of the week there on a somewhat regular basis, as well as other content that will be coming out. So go ahead and check us out on all of those. We're also on YouTube, Playmakers Corner, and we're also on Twitch. Go ahead and check out some of our past Twitch streams, Playmakers Corner. But I've been your host, Cody Stoffer, and until the recap on Tuesday, I'll be seeing you.